Okay, folks, here we are. This will be, or this presentation will serve as a review for everything that we've done for the Bill of Rights. So, what you ought to be doing at this point is taking a look at your notes that you've taken from class on the Bill of Rights. If there's anything that you don't see in your notes, it's a good opportunity to add to or update your notes. Or if after this review and your notes and class lecture, there's still something that is unclear to you or you think that we should discuss, make a note of it, and we can absolutely do that. So here's our review of the Bill of Rights. We are in 1791, and starting with the first Congress of the United States, Representative Madison from Virginia, as promised, is working on 10 amendments or additions to the United States Constitution, and they take the form of the first 10 or what we call the Bill of Rights. So let's go through them. First Amendment is then your right to freedom of expression. These are the dearest freedoms that we have as Americans. It's inclusive of your right to religion, speech, press, assembly, petition. Now, the interesting thing about freedom of religion is we find examples of freedom of religion in the state constitutions of all the 13 states. We find examples of religious tolerance going as far back as the Maryland Edict of Toleration and the Pennsylvania State Constitution. But the Constitution itself says that there can be no religious test for office. But here we have a firm statement that says that Congress can make no law and states can make no law respecting the establishment of a religion. So we can practice whatever religion we want to. In terms of freedom of speech, we have the right to political speech. We can speak freely. We can peacefully assemble. We can address the government in form of a petition at any level: school, state, county, local, national. And the freedom of press means the media has an unfettered right to report on stories. Second Amendment is your right to bear arms. We didn't spend too much time going over the Second Amendment because it's pretty straightforward. The one controversial thing in the Second Amendment maybe concerns the right to individual gun ownership in places where the state or the municipality would like to ban or regulate personal firearms in some way. And if you look at the verbiage of the Second Amendment, it references a well-regulated militia. The court has extended that right to bear arms for a well-regulated militia to individuals and individual gun ownership. So, that's where we are with the Second Amendment right now. You can own a gun. You can have all the guns you want. Second Amendment. We spent almost no time going over the Third Amendment. I mentioned this in one of my classes, but the amazing thing about the Bill of Rights isn't that there's this amendment that we look at and it seems like it has no use 230 some years later. But for me, the more amazing thing isn't that there's one amendment that seems ridiculous. It's that there are 9 amendments in the Bill of Rights that are really useful to us today in 2021. I think that's pretty cool. The Army can't live in your house. Quartering of soldiers. Sure. A thing that they do. Never. But it was important enough to the founding fathers, it was important enough to the framers of the Constitution and the authors of the Bill of Rights um, that they include it. So it tells you something of the mindset that they were in 1791. Ah, so we get to the Fourth Amendment. This is your protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. Can the government seize your property? Yes, it can. Under eminent domain, it can take things away from you, but it's got to pay you for it. You know, if the government needs your house to build an army base or a highway, it can take it in the interest of the public good, but it's got to give you its value. It can't just take something away from you and tell you to kick rocks. You can be searched. Your property can be searched because the state is looking for evidence of wrongdoing, but it can only be with a search warrant that is obtained using probable cause. So there's an example I have of a search warrant on the left. It's got to be signed by a judge. It's got to be dated. It's got to be based on PC. And there on the right, looks like some law enforcement types, military types training to execute a search warrant. Fifth Amendment. Fifth Amendment, along with the Fourth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, and the Eighth Amendment, are your due process rights. We know that habeas corpus is in the body of the Constitution because it says the president is not allowed to suspend habeas corpus except in times of emergency. It's your protection against double jeopardy. You cannot be tried twice for the same crime, provided you have been placed in jeopardy. And then the next part of that, of course, is your protection against self-incrimination. This is your right to remain silent, which may or may not be an actual right to remain silent. But you never have to give testimony against yourself in court. They will never put you on the stand and force you to confess to wrongdoing. You can always remain mute in your own case. And I brought it up in class, so I thought you might want to look at some additional information if it's something that interests you. You know, I always found it interesting that everybody in America knows the name of this guy, and generally, you know, he is not an important person. He died not too long after his conviction was overturned on the grounds that the police violated his Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights. But the reason that the police will inform you of your Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights is because constitutionally the courts have found that they have to. It's the responsibility of the state to let you know that you have the right to remain silent, that if you voluntarily waive the right to remain silent, your confession or statements that you make can be used against you, that you have a Sixth Amendment right to an attorney, and that if you can't afford an attorney, it's the responsibility of the state to provide you with an attorney free of cost or mostly free of cost. So on the left there, most police departments today, they make their officers, their sworn officers, carry laminated copies of the department's version of the Miranda warnings. So when they are arresting someone, they can just whip that card out of their pocket and read it verbatim. We discussed the Sixth Amendment. Sixth Amendment is your right to a speedy and public trial. So, a question that I get a lot is what constitutes speedy, and it's just like, well, what constitutes reasonable, and what constitutes a reasonable amount of time in a habeas corpus case? It's up to the courts to settle that question. Um, you know, Here in this PowerPoint, we see that it's saying that you can't be kept in jail for over a year without a trial, but you could probably think of some examples where people were held in jail for a year before their case is decided. O.J. Simpson comes to mind. Um, because, like any other right that you have in the Bill of Rights, it's waiverable. You can waive the right to a speedy trial. You have the right in the Sixth Amendment to an impartial jury of your peers, people who are from the same area you're from, the same county, the same state, citizens where you live. And you have the right to call witnesses on your behalf, in your defense. And anybody that gives testimony against you, you can call and confront witnesses. And thanks to the Supreme Court, even if you are indigent, even if you have no money and not a dime to your name, you have to be given a lawyer who works on your behalf. We didn't spend too much time looking at the Seventh Amendment because it's the right to a jury trial in civil matters. So if you sue a company for wrongdoing or for hurting you in some way, and it's not a criminal matter, nobody's going to jail, but you have a plaintiff and a defendant in certain matters, as long as it meets a dollar threshold, you can have that case heard by a jury. So, Seventh Amendment. Eighth Amendment is part of due process as well, because it's what happens once a person is arrested and what happens if a person is duly convicted. So, first part of it says that excessive bail shall not be required. So if it's ruled that you are a person who can receive bail, then the bail should not be so onerous that you can't get out of jail because of this thing that we have called the presumption of innocence. Until such time as you are convicted by a jury of your peers beyond a reasonable doubt, you are presumed to be innocent. So if the judge can grant you bail, and if the judge can let you out pending the outcome of your trial, usually they do it. And in New Jersey, we know we've had bail reform. So it's been the end to cash bail in New Jersey. So people aren't putting up money anymore. So only in extreme cases like murder or serious assaults, or when the person is considered a flight risk, will the court deny bail, or will the court deny releasing the accused on his or her own recognizance? Meaning, we'll just let you go and hope you come back. The other part of the Eighth Amendment is a protection against punishment that is cruel and unusual. Cruel and unusual punishment. And our understanding of what constitutes cruel and unusual punishment has changed over the past 200 years. What is considered cruel and unusual today would not have been considered cruel and unusual to the framers of the Constitution. But the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are flexible and have shown to be flexible. There they are with an electric chair, a form of capital punishment that was once widely used in the United States and is not anymore. The nickname for the electric chair in Florida was Old Sparky. Probably not interesting to anybody but me. All right. So the last two amendments to the Constitution that nobody ever talks about, last two amendments in the Bill of Rights, the Ninth and the 10th Amendment, are the two amendments that protect federalism. So we've got a lot of enumerated rights in the Bill of Rights, a lot of enumerated rights 1 through 8. And in the Ninth Amendment, what we're saying is any right that's not explicitly stated in the Constitution or forbidden by the Constitution belongs to the people. So as long as the Constitution doesn't explicitly forbid it, like the Constitution says that only the federal government can form treaties with foreign countries, and only the federal government can print money. Well, as long as it's not something that is expressly forbidden in the Constitution, then those rights exist. And those rights exist for the states, and those rights exist for the people. And furthermore, in the 10th Amendment, any power not explicitly granted to the federal government belongs to the states or belongs to the people themselves. So this is the amendment that is basically diametrically opposed to that thing we talked about in the body of the Constitution called the Elastic Clause. So the Elastic Clause, you'll remember, can stretch to give the federal government, the national government, all sorts of powers that maybe weren't intended or maybe weren't thought of by the framers of the Constitution. But on the other side, the 10th Amendment is the amendment that says, well, if it doesn't explicitly say it, then it belongs to the states, not the federal government. So, think of it as a pendulum that is continually swinging back and forth between the states and the federal government with regard to power and authority. 10th Amendment. Okay, so that is our review of the Bill of Rights. And like I said, if you guys have any leftover questions, we can certainly discuss. And for those of you who are taking a quiz as part of this activity, I hope you did well.